The rain crashed against the towering glass walls of the courthouse, like heaven itself had come to witness a tragedy that should never have happened. Hundreds of reporters crowded behind the barricades, their cameras flashing so relentlessly that the entrance looked like a sea of lightning. Black luxury vehicles lined the driveway, their polished bodies reflecting the stormy sky. Then the largest convoy came to a stop. The rear door of the first limousine opened, and Kang Ji-Hoon stepped out. Every conversation died instantly. At 35, he was one of South Korea's youngest billionaires, the ruthless chairman of Daesung Holdings, a man feared by politicians, respected by rival conglomerates, and whispered about in the criminal underworld he had escaped years ago. A black dragon tattoo curled from beneath the collar of his tailored charcoal suit, climbing the left side of his neck before disappearing behind his ear. It was the only reminder of the violent life he had buried to build an empire. His expression was unreadable, but his clenched jaw betrayed a storm no one could see. He wasn't looking at the cameras, he wasn't looking at the crowd, he was staring at a single woman standing at the top of the courthouse steps. Nia Okoye. 7 years had changed everything, except her eyes. They were still warm, still gentle, still capable of making him remember the man he used to be, before ambition consumed him. She stood dressed in a simple ivory coat, one hand gripping a faded envelope so tightly the edges had bent beneath her fingers. Her hair swayed in the wind as tears filled her eyes. She looked at him as though she were seeing a ghost. "You finally read it," she whispered. Ji-Hoon couldn't answer. His throat burned. His hands trembled as he held several yellowed pages that had been folded for 7 years. Ink blurred by old tears covered every line. His voice cracked for the first time in years. "You begged me not to sign." She closed her eyes. "No," she shook her head slowly. "I begged you to read." His knees nearly gave way. Around them, reporters shouted questions. Cameras clicked wildly. Bodyguards struggled to keep people back, but neither of them heard any of it. There was only one question echoing inside Ji-Hoon's mind. If he had opened that letter 7 years ago, would they still have been husband and wife today? Before either of them could move, a young woman pushed through the crowd. She looked no older than 22. Her face was pale with panic. "Chairman Kang," she cried. "You have to come now. He's awake, and he keeps asking for his mother." Ji-Hoon's heart stopped. Nia's eyes widened. The letter slipped from his hand, fluttering into a puddle beneath the courthouse steps. The rain soaked every page as the past came rushing back. 7 years earlier. If stories about broken promises, impossible love, painful regrets, and second chances keep you watching until the very end, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. You never know, someone across the world might be listening with you. Now, let's go back to the day everything began. 7 years earlier, the first cherry blossoms of spring drifted through the streets of Seoul, like tiny pieces of pink snow. Nia Okoye smiled as she stepped out of a crowded subway station, carefully protecting the small paper bag in her hands. Inside was a homemade lunch she had prepared before sunrise. It was Ji-Hoon's favorite. She had spent nearly 3 hours making it exactly the way he liked, even though she knew there was a good chance he wouldn't have time to eat. She never stopped trying. At 27, Nia worked as a pediatric rehabilitation therapist at one of Seoul's largest children's hospitals. Every day she helped children who had survived devastating accidents learn to walk again, laugh again, and believe in tomorrow. Her patients adored her because she never treated them like broken people. She treated them like miracles waiting to bloom. "Teacher Nia," a little boy shouted as she entered the therapy room. He ran toward her with uneven steps before wrapping his tiny arms around her waist. She laughed softly and knelt to hug him. "Look at you," she said proudly. "You're walking farther every week because you said heroes don't quit." Her smile grew, but something behind her eyes quietly faded. She had become everyone's source of hope, yet lately she struggled to find hope inside herself. Her husband had barely come home during the past 2 months. Every meal she prepared grew cold before midnight. Every anniversary dinner became another business meeting. Every promise turned into another postponed conversation. She kept telling herself it was temporary, that once Daesung Holdings completed its massive international merger, things would return to normal. She still believed the man she married was somewhere beneath the endless meetings, billion-dollar negotiations, and sleepless nights. She just had to be patient. That evening, she stood outside Daesung Holdings' 70-story headquarters, looking up at the building that seemed to touch the clouds. Employees rushed past in expensive suits, each carrying the same exhausted expression. She entered the executive floor, carrying the lunch she had reheated twice. Ji-Hoon's secretary, Choi Min-suk, immediately stood. "Madam," she smiled warmly. "He's still inside?" The secretary hesitated before nodding. "Chairman Kang hasn't left this office in 36 hours. She sighed quietly. "Has he eaten?" Min-suk lowered his eyes. "Only coffee." Nia looked toward the enormous wooden doors at the end of the hallway. Beyond them sat the man she loved more than anyone else in the world. She took a deep breath and knocked gently. "Come in," Ji-Hoon answered without looking up. She entered slowly. The office overlooked the glittering Seoul skyline. 3 massive monitors displayed stock markets from around the world. Financial reports covered the desk. Ji-Hoon sat with his sleeves rolled to his elbows, his black dragon tattoo disappearing beneath the collar of his crisp white shirt. Dark circles rested beneath his sharp eyes, but they never left the documents before him. "You skipped lunch again," Nia said softly. "I'm busy. I noticed." She placed the warm meal on his desk. The aroma filled the room. For the briefest moment, his eyes lifted toward her. There was love there, buried beneath exhaustion, buried beneath responsibility, buried so deeply that even he no longer knew how to reach it. Then his phone rang. He answered immediately. Nia stood silently as another business deal stole yet another moment that belonged to them. She had no idea that inside her handbag rested a sealed hospital envelope she hadn't found the courage to show him. And inside that envelope was a truth powerful enough to destroy everything they believed about their marriage. Or save it forever. Nia stood in Ji-Hoon's office for almost 3 minutes after his phone call began, waiting for him to look at her again. He did not. His voice became colder as he spoke into the phone, every word sharp enough to cut through the silence between them. "No, cancel the Busan supplier. If they leak the contract again, bury them legally. I don't care whose nephew he is." Nia lowered her eyes to the lunchbox on his desk. Steam still rose from the food, curling softly into the air like something alive and fragile. She had made it with her own hands. She had seasoned the soup the way his late mother used to. She had packed the tiny side dishes carefully, remembering how he once told her that food tasted different when someone cared enough to prepare it slowly. That was before he became chairman, before Daesung Holdings became his entire identity, before he stopped coming home before sunrise, before she started feeling like a guest in her own marriage. Ji-Hoon ended the call and reached for another document without touching the food. Nia finally spoke. "I went to the hospital today." His pen paused for half a second. Only half. "Are you sick?" The question should have sounded concerned. Instead, it came out distracted, like another item on his endless list of problems. "I don't know yet." Now he looked up. His eyes were dark, intense, and suddenly focused. For one brief second, she saw the man who had once waited outside her apartment in the rain for 4 hours, just to apologize after their first argument. "What do you mean?" Nia gripped the strap of her handbag. The hospital envelope inside felt heavier than paper should. "They ran some tests. I have to go back tomorrow." Ji-Hoon stood. "Why didn't you tell me earlier?" A sad smile touched her lips. "You were in Singapore earlier, then Tokyo, then here. I didn't know where to place my pain on your schedule." His face tightened. "That isn't fair." "I know." Her voice became soft. "But it is true." Silence fell between them. It should have been the moment where he walked around the desk, held her, asked questions, demanded answers, refused to let her carry fear alone. His body even moved slightly, as if some buried part of him remembered how to love her properly. Then the office door opened. No knock, no apology. Seo Ra-eun entered wearing a cream designer suit and a smile that never reached her eyes. She was Ji-Hoon's strategic affairs director, the daughter of a powerful assemblyman, and the woman every gossip magazine insisted would have been a better wife for him. "Chairman, the Japanese investors are waiting downstairs." Her gaze slid toward Nia, cool and deliberate. "Oh, I didn't realize Madam was here." Nia knew that tone, polite enough for witnesses, cruel enough for the woman it was meant to wound. Ji-Hoon looked back at the documents. "Tell them 5 minutes." Ra-eun stepped closer. "They won't wait, not after what happened with Chairman Mori's son." Something passed across Ji-Hoon's face. Not fear, calculation. Nia saw it clearly. Business had entered the room, And once business entered, love always stepped aside. She reached into her handbag and touched the hospital envelope. "Ji-Hoon," she whispered, "can you come with me tomorrow?" He did not answer quickly enough. That was the first wound. Then he said, "Tomorrow is impossible." That was the second. "Just 1 hour." "Nia," his voice lowered. "The merger signing is tomorrow." She stared at him. "And if the doctor tells me something serious?" He looked away. "Take Min-sok with you." Something inside her went quiet. Not broken, not yet. Just quiet in a way that frightened her. Ra-eun's lips curved almost invisibly. Nia removed her hand from the envelope and stepped back. "Your lunch will get cold." Ji-Hoon looked at her then, and guilt flickered across his face. But guilt without action is just another form of selfishness. She turned and walked out before he could offer an apology too small for the wound he had opened. In the elevator, her reflection stared back at her from the mirrored walls. Beautiful. Tired. Holding herself together with dignity because falling apart in a billionaire's building would only give people something to whisper about. Her phone vibrated. It was a message from the hospital. "Mrs. Kang, your follow-up appointment is confirmed for tomorrow at 10 a.m. Please come with a family member if possible." Nia read the words twice. Come with a family member. She almost laughed. She had a husband. She had a mansion. She had bodyguards, drivers, staff, luxury, and a surname that opened every door in Seoul. Yet she had never felt more alone. The next morning, Ji-Hoon sat across from Japanese investors, beneath a chandelier worth more than the house Nia grew up in. His face was calm, his suit perfect, his dragon tattoo hidden beneath a high collar, visible only when he turned his head. Around him, men twice his age bowed with respect. He had power, he had money, he had the room. But when he signed the first merger document, his pen hesitated. For no reason he could explain, he remembered Nia's face in the elevator doors. He checked his watch. 10:17 a.m. At the hospital, Nia sat alone in a white examination room. The doctor, a kind-eyed woman named Dr. Baek Yoon-ji, folded her hands over Nia's file. "Mrs. Kang, I need you to breathe before I explain." Nia's fingers went cold. "Is it cancer?" "No." The doctor paused. "You're pregnant." The world stopped. Nia stared at her. "Pregnant?" 8 weeks. Her hand moved slowly to her stomach. 8 weeks. A tiny life. A miracle she and Ji-Hoon had quietly prayed for during the first year of marriage, before work swallowed their home whole. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "Are you sure?" Dr. Baek smiled gently. "Yes." For the first time in months, hope entered Nia's chest so suddenly it hurt. She imagined Ji-Hoon's face, not the chairman, not the ruthless billionaire. Her Ji-Hoon, the man who once whispered that if they ever had a child, he would learn how to be gentler than his own father. She laughed through tears. Then Dr. Baek's smile faded. "There is something else." Nia's joy froze. "What?" "Your blood pressure is unstable, and there are early complications. With careful monitoring, you and the baby can be fine. But stress must be reduced immediately." Nia swallowed. "How serious?" "Serious enough that you need support." The doctor leaned forward. "You should not face this alone." Nia looked down at her wedding ring. "I won't." She wanted to believe that. She truly did. That evening, she waited in their mansion, with a small gift box on the dining table. Inside were tiny white baby shoes. Beside it sat the hospital report. She had asked the chef to prepare dinner, but arranged the table herself. 2 candles, 2 plates. No staff hovering nearby, just husband and wife. At 8 p.m., she received a message from Ji-Hoon. "Don't wait up. Emergency board meeting." Her hand trembled around the phone. She typed, "I need to tell you something important." 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then his reply came. "Tomorrow." Nia stared at the word until it blurred. Tomorrow. Love was always being postponed until tomorrow. But by tomorrow, someone else would already be planning the end of her marriage. Across Seoul, in a private lounge above an elite hotel, Seo Ra-eun slid a folder across a glass table toward Ji-Hoon's stepmother, Madame Yoon-hae Rim. Hae-rim was elegant, cold, and obsessed with protecting the Kang name from anything she considered beneath it. To her, Nia had always been a mistake. "He still cares for her," Hae-rim said. Ra-eun smiled. "Then we make him believe she stopped caring first." Hae-rim opened the folder. Inside were photographs, Nia leaving the hospital with Dr. Beck's assistant, a young male nurse who had simply helped her to a taxi when she felt dizzy. The angle made it look intimate, false, poisonous, perfect. Hai-Rim's eyes hardened. Will he believe this? Ra-Yoon poured tea calmly. Not by itself. She reached into her bag and removed another envelope. But he will believe her signature. Hai-Rim looked inside. Divorce papers. Already prepared. Already dated. Already waiting for the lie that would destroy 2 lives. Back at the mansion, Nia sat alone at the dining table until the candles died. The baby shoes remained unopened. The hospital report remained unread. And upstairs, in Ji-Hoon's locked study, his old enemies began moving through the shadows, because the woman carrying his child had just become the easiest way to break him. Ji-Hoon arrived home just after 2 o'clock in the morning. The mansion was silent except for the grandfather clock in the foyer. Every swing of its pendulum seemed to remind him how many hours had slipped away. He loosened his tie as he climbed the marble staircase, exhaustion weighing on every step. When he reached the bedroom, the lamp on Nia's side was still glowing. She had fallen asleep sitting against the headboard, a book resting unopened on her lap. Her face looked peaceful, but dried tear tracks shimmered beneath the soft light. He stood there for a long moment. Something tightened inside his chest. He slowly walked closer and brushed a loose strand of hair away from her face. She stirred slightly but didn't wake. His eyes landed on the small gift box sitting on her bedside table. Curious, he reached toward it. Before his fingers could touch the lid, his phone vibrated violently. The screen displayed only one name, Madame Yoon. He frowned, before answering quietly. What happened? Her voice sounded unusually urgent. Come to the estate immediately. Don't ask questions. It's 2 in the morning. If you still care about your family's reputation, you'll come now. The call ended. Ji-Hoon looked back at the sleeping woman beside him. He wanted to wake her. He wanted to apologize for another broken promise. Instead, he quietly pulled the blanket over her shoulders and left the room. The unopened gift box remained exactly where it was. Inside, the tiny white baby shoes waited for a father who still didn't know they existed. By sunrise, Ji-Hoon stood inside the Kang family's private estate overlooking the Han River. His stepmother, Madame Yoon Hai-Rim, sat elegantly in the drawing room with Seo Ra-Eun beside her. Neither woman smiled. A thick envelope rested on the coffee table. Sit, Hai-Rim ordered. Ji-Hoon remained standing. I have a board meeting in an hour. Hai-Rim slid the envelope toward him. You'll want to see this first. He opened it casually. The first photograph showed Nia smiling at a young man outside the hospital. The second captured the nurse steadying her as she stumbled down the steps. The third appeared to show him embracing her before she entered a taxi. Ji-Hoon's expression darkened. Who is he? Ra-Eun answered softly. We've been investigating quietly for several weeks. Ji-Hoon looked up sharply. Investigating my wife? Because we were worried. Hai-Rim leaned forward. Your father built this family's reputation with blood. We couldn't ignore rumors. Rumors? Ra-Eun placed another document before him. She has been meeting him repeatedly. Ji-Hoon scanned the pages. Hospital dates, times, surveillance photographs. Every visit looked suspicious, because every truth had been carefully rearranged into a lie. That's impossible, Ji-Hoon muttered. She wouldn't, Hai-Rim interrupted him. Wouldn't what? Lie? Hide things? She's already been hiding these meetings from you. His jaw tightened. There has to be an explanation. Then why hasn't she given one? Ji-Hoon had no answer, because he suddenly realized he hadn't asked. He hadn't been home long enough to ask about anything. Ra-Eun spoke gently. Chairman, sometimes the people we trust most know exactly how to deceive us. The words landed precisely where she intended. Doubt entered before reason could defend itself. At that same moment, Nia woke with a smile. Today, she would finally tell Ji-Hoon about the baby. She reached for the gift box beside her bed. Empty. Her smile faded. She searched the room before noticing it still sitting unopened exactly where she had left it. Relief washed over her. Maybe tonight, she whispered to herself. She picked up the hospital report, slipped it into a cream-colored envelope together with a handwritten letter she had spent most of the night writing, and carefully sealed it. On the front she wrote only 4 words. For my husband. She kissed the envelope gently. You'll understand everything. Hours later she arrived at Daesung Holdings carrying the letter. Employees greeted her warmly as always, but something felt different. Conversation stopped when she walked past. Eyes lingered a little longer than usual. Smiles looked forced. She reached Ji-Hoon's office just as raised voices echoed through the doorway. "Chairman," Min-sok said nervously. "Madam is here." Ji-Hoon didn't answer immediately. "Send her in." Nia entered smiling. "I finally caught you before another meeting." He looked at her without smiling back. His expression was unreadable. Cold, controlled, unfamiliar. "Sit down." Her heartbeat quickened. She had imagined this conversation so many times. She placed the envelope on his desk. "Before anything else, I wrote something I wanted you to read." Ji-Hoon didn't touch it. Instead, he slowly pushed the surveillance photographs across the desk toward her. Nia's smile disappeared. "What is this? You tell me." She picked up the first photograph. Confusion crossed her face. "This is the hospital. I know where it is. The nurse was helping me because I almost fainted." Ji-Hoon's voice hardened. "Why were you there?" Nia looked at the envelope. "That's what the letter explains. Answer me." She met his eyes. "I wanted us to read it together." He laughed bitterly. "Together." He stood abruptly, towering over the desk. "While you're meeting another man behind my back?" Her eyes widened. "What? Don't insult my intelligence." He pointed toward the photographs. "Explain these." Nia stared at him in disbelief. "You're accusing me?" "I'm asking for the truth." Tears began forming in her eyes. "Then read the letter. You can tell me now." "No." Her voice trembled. "Because if you love me, you'll read it first." Ji-Hoon looked at the envelope for several silent seconds. Then his office phone rang. Min-sok's voice came through the speaker. "Chairman, the legal team is here." Ji-Hoon closed his eyes briefly. "Send them in." 4 lawyers entered carrying thick files. One of them placed a document directly in front of Ji-Hoon. "Chairman, these are the divorce papers Madam Yoon requested we prepare, in case today's allegations proved accurate." Nia's entire body froze. "Divorce?" She looked at Ji-Hoon, waiting for him to laugh, to tear the papers apart, to tell everyone they had lost their minds. Instead, he remained silent. "Ji-Hoon," she whispered, "please." He picked up the divorce papers with shaking hands. "Just tell me the truth." Tears spilled down her cheeks. "The truth is inside that envelope." She pushed her handwritten letter closer to him. "Read it." Madam Yoon's words echoed inside his head. "She'll lie, she'll cry, she'll make you hesitate." He stared at the envelope, then at the photographs, then back at Nia. His pride made the decision his heart was begging him not to make. Without opening her letter, without looking beyond the first page, Ji-Hoon reached for the pen lying beside the legal documents. Nia stopped breathing. "Don't," she whispered. His signature touched the paper. One stroke, then another. The ink hadn't even dried before something inside Nia shattered beyond repair. She slowly picked up her unopened letter, placed it gently beneath the signed divorce papers, and looked at the man she still loved. "One day," she said through quiet tears, "you'll finally read what you refused to hear today." She turned and walked toward the door without looking back. Ji-Hoon didn't stop her. He couldn't, because he still believed he had just protected himself from betrayal, never realizing he had signed away the only family he would ever truly have. As the elevator doors closed behind Nia, she placed one trembling hand over her stomach and whispered to the tiny life growing inside her, "It's just you and me now." At that exact moment, someone hidden at the end of the hallway quietly lowered a camera. The entire confrontation had been recorded, and the person holding that recording had no intention of letting the truth stay buried forever. The revolving glass doors spun behind her, as though the building itself had already forgotten she had ever belonged there. The afternoon sky had turned gray, matching the emptiness spreading through her chest. She didn't cry immediately. The tears refused to come. Some heartbreaks were too deep for tears. They simply hollowed a person from the inside. One hand rested protectively over her stomach, while the other held the cream-colored envelope Ji-Hoon had refused to open. Her letter was still sealed, her handwriting still untouched. 7 pages. 7 pages that could have saved a marriage. 7 pages that now felt heavier than the entire city. Her phone vibrated. Ji-Hoon. She stared at his name until the screen went dark. A second later, another message appeared. "The legal team will arrange everything." She closed her eyes. Not a single question. Not a single apology. Not even, "Are you okay?" She quietly deleted the message without replying. Across the street, inside a black SUV with tinted windows, Seo Ra-eun watched Nia leave through binoculars. A satisfied smile spread across her face. "She's gone," she said. The man sitting beside her lowered a camera onto his lap. He was the one who had secretly recorded the confrontation outside Ji-Hoon's office. "Should I erase the footage?" he asked. Ra-eun looked at him. "No. Then what?" "One day," she replied calmly. "It may become useful." She leaned back against the leather seat. "For now, make sure Mrs. Kang disappears quietly." The man frowned. "Disappear?" Ra-eun smiled without warmth. "Not forever." She looked back toward Nia, who was slowly walking down the sidewalk alone. Just long enough that Chairman Kang learns to live without her. Nia returned to the mansion before sunset. It no longer felt like home. Staff members avoided her eyes as she climbed the staircase. Someone had already informed them. Divorce in wealthy families traveled faster than truth. She entered the master bedroom and stood silently in the center of the room. Every memory surrounded her. Their wedding photograph, the bookshelf they had assembled together after arguing over the instructions, the piano Ji-Hoon had surprised her with, on their second anniversary, because she once mentioned missing the old one at the hospital. He had remembered that. Back then, he remembered everything. She opened the closet and pulled out a single suitcase. Nothing more. Clothes could be replaced. Jewelry never mattered to her. Luxury had never been the reason she married him. She folded each outfit carefully, not because she planned to return, because she refused to leave with bitterness in her hands. As she reached the top shelf, a small photo album slipped onto the floor. It opened to a picture taken 5 years earlier. Ji-Hoon stood behind her, wrapping both arms around her waist while laughing at something she had whispered into his ear. He wasn't Chairman Kang in that picture. He wasn't feared. He wasn't untouchable. He was simply her husband. A tear finally escaped. She pressed the photograph against her chest. "Where did you go?" she whispered. "What happened to us?" Downstairs, the front doors opened. Ji-Hoon had come home earlier than expected. He loosened his tie while handing documents to Min-sok. "Where is Madam?" The butler hesitated. "She's upstairs, Chairman." Ji-Hoon climbed the staircase 2 steps at a time. He stopped outside their bedroom door. It stood slightly open. Inside, Nia quietly zipped her suitcase. His chest tightened unexpectedly. "You're leaving." She nodded without turning around. "The papers are signed. The lawyers will transfer the properties to your name." She smiled sadly. "I don't want them." "You have every right. I didn't marry your money." Silence settled between them again. Ji-Hoon looked around the room. Half the closet remained untouched. Her favorite books still sat neatly on the shelves. The piano downstairs remained exactly where he had placed it years ago. Suddenly the mansion looked strangely empty, even before she left. "Where will you go?" he asked. "Somewhere peaceful." "Do you have enough money?" She almost laughed. "Now you're worried?" He couldn't answer, because he wasn't worried about money. He was worried about something he couldn't name. Nia picked up her suitcase and walked toward him. They stopped less than a meter apart. For a moment neither moved. She looked into the eyes of the man she had loved through every impossible day. "There's one last thing I want to ask." Ji-Hoon swallowed. "What?" She held up the sealed envelope. "Please." Her voice was barely above a whisper. "When you're ready, read this." He stared at it. His pride still stood between them like an invisible wall. "If it changes anything," he began. She gently shook her head. "It changes everything." She placed the envelope on the hallway table beside him. Then she walked past. Their shoulders brushed lightly. It felt like goodbye. Ji-Hoon closed his eyes as her footsteps faded down the staircase. Something deep inside him screamed to stop her, to ask her to stay, to forget the photographs, to believe the woman he had loved for 7 years instead of strangers carrying evidence. But the voice of pride spoke louder. He remained frozen. The front door closed. Nia was gone. 20 minutes later, she arrived at the airport. Her best friend, Dr. Lena Mensa, stood waiting near the departure gate. Lena had accepted a medical research position in Vancouver 6 months earlier and had begged Nia to join her countless times. Nia always refused because Ji-Hoon was in Seoul. Today, there was nothing left to hold her there. Lena hugged her tightly. "You're shaking." Nia finally broke down. She buried her face against Lena's shoulder and sobbed without restraint. "He never read it," she whispered between tears. "He didn't even try." Lena held her closer. Come with me. Nia nodded weakly. I have to protect my baby. Lena froze. She slowly pulled back. Baby? Nia smiled through tears and placed Lena's hand over her stomach. I'm pregnant. Lena's eyes filled instantly. Does Ji-Hoon know? Nia looked away toward the runway where airplanes prepared for takeoff. No. Will you tell him? She slowly shook her head. He already made his choice. At Daesung Holdings, Ji-Hoon sat alone in his office, long after everyone else had gone home. The divorce papers still lay across his desk. Beneath them, the cream-colored envelope remained exactly where Nia had placed it. He reached toward it. His fingers stopped inches away. Then his office phone rang. Chairman, Min-Sok said urgently. We've located Madam. Ji-Hoon's heart skipped. Where is she? She boarded an international flight 20 minutes ago. Destination? A pause. Canada. Ji-Hoon stood so abruptly that his chair crashed onto the floor. Prepare the car. Chairman, the flight has already departed. He looked through the floor-to-ceiling window toward the night sky above Seoul. Somewhere beyond those clouds, the woman he had once promised never to let go was leaving his life forever. On his desk, the unopened letter remained beneath his hand. He stared at it for a long time before sliding it into the bottom drawer of his desk and locking it away. Not today, he whispered to himself. He had no idea that by locking away that letter, he had also locked away the truth about his unborn child. And 7 years would pass before he found the courage to open that drawer again. 7 years later, the city of Vancouver shimmered beneath the golden light of early autumn. Children laughed across the playground of the Harmony Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, while colorful leaves drifted gently through the air. A little boy sprinted across the grass, narrowly avoiding a therapist pushing a wheelchair. Eli, a woman called. Slow down. The 7-year-old laughed without stopping. You can't catch me, Mom. Nia smiled despite herself. You're supposed to be helping me today. Eli finally stopped beside a maple tree, breathing hard but grinning from ear to ear. His thick black hair danced in the breeze. His smile belonged to Nia, but his eyes, his sharp jawline, and the quiet confidence that appeared whenever he became serious belonged unmistakably to Kang Ji-Hoon. Every single day, Nia saw pieces of the man she had once loved reflected back at her through their son. Sometimes it hurt, sometimes it healed. Most days it did both. Eli ran back and slipped his tiny hand into hers. Did I make you worry? A little. Sorry. He hugged her waist. Grandma Agnes says real gentlemen don't make ladies cry. Nia laughed softly. Sister Agnes had become family after Nia volunteered at the church clinic during her first year in Canada. The elderly nun had loved Eli as though he were her own grandson. Grandma Agnes is very wise, Nia said. Eli looked up. Mom? Yes? Do I have a dad? The question arrived so suddenly that Nia nearly stopped walking. 7 years. She had always known this day would come. She just never knew it would hurt this much. She knelt until they were eye level. Yes, where is he? She reached out and brushed his hair gently away from his forehead. Very far away. Does he know me? Nia hesitated. No. Eli frowned. Why? She forced herself to smile. Because life doesn't always tell people the truth when it should. He thought quietly for several seconds. Then he nodded as though accepting an answer only children could understand. If he ever meets me, he whispered, I'll still say hello. Nia's heart cracked. He had inherited his father's eyes, but thankfully, he had inherited her heart. Thousands of kilometers away in Seoul, Ji-Hoon stood before the floor-to-ceiling windows of Daesung Holdings' executive office. The city stretched endlessly beneath him, yet nothing about the view brought satisfaction anymore. At 42, he had become one of Asia's wealthiest businessmen. Daesung Holdings had doubled in value. His face appeared regularly on magazine covers. Presidents requested meetings with him. Investors competed for his attention. But every achievement echoed inside an empty mansion. He never remarried. No woman ever crossed the invisible line he had drawn around the memory of Nia. The staff noticed it. His friends noticed it. Even Madam Yoon had eventually stopped arranging introductions after he rejected every single one without explanation. His dragon tattoo remained visible whenever he removed his tie, a reminder that even powerful men carried scars that expensive suits couldn't hide. A knock interrupted his thoughts. Come in. Min-Sok entered carrying a thick folder. His hair had begun turning gray over the years, but his loyalty had never changed. Chairman, The Vancouver Children's Medical Foundation accepted our donation. Ji-Hoon nodded absent-mindedly. Good. They've invited you to attend their anniversary gala next month. Ji-Hoon looked up. Vancouver? Yes. Decline it. Min Seok hesitated. Chairman, they specifically requested your presence because of the rehabilitation center you're funding. Ji-Hoon sighed. Pediatric rehabilitation. The very word stirred memories he spent years trying to bury. Nia loved helping children learn to walk again. Without realizing it, every major charity he had funded after the divorce somehow connected back to her work. He never admitted it aloud. Leave the invitation. Yes, Chairman. After Min Seok left, Ji-Hoon opened the folder. The first page contained photographs of children laughing inside the rehabilitation center. Then one picture made him pause. A woman stood in the background speaking with several young patients. Her face wasn't fully visible, only her profile. His heartbeat became strangely uneven. Impossible, he whispered. He leaned closer. Before he could study it further, his phone rang. The screen displayed Madame Yoon. He ignored it.
7 years. That's how long one unopened letter remained hidden in the bottom drawer of a billionaire's desk. 7 years of silence. 7 years of regret. 7 years of believing a lie that destroyed 2 lives. On the day he signed the divorce papers, Kang Ji-Hoon never looked beyond the first page. He never asked one more question. He never gave the woman he loved a chance to explain. What he didn't know was that tucked inside that final letter was a truth that could have changed everything, a truth she had desperately tried to tell him before it was too late. Instead, he chose suspicion over trust, pride over patience, and evidence over the heart of the woman who had never stopped loving him. She walked away carrying nothing but a suitcase, a broken heart, and a secret that would remain hidden for 7 long years. While he built one of the most powerful business empires in Asia, she quietly rebuilt her life on the other side of the world, raising a child who looked more like his father with every passing year. Neither of them imagined that fate would one day bring them face to face again. By then, the little boy had already learned to live without a father, and the man who should have watched his first steps had no idea his son even existed. But destiny has a way of returning to the moments we try hardest to forget. One forgotten letter, one terrible decision, one chance to discover whether love can survive the weight of regret. As this story unfolds, you'll witness heartbreaking choices, hidden truths, painful sacrifices, and a second chance that no one believed was possible. So stay with us until the very end, because sometimes the smallest decision, like refusing to read one letter, can change the course of an entire lifetime.
Rang again, and again. Finally he answered. What is it? Her voice sounded weaker than he remembered. Age had begun catching even the strongest people. Come to the estate. I'm working. Please. The single word surprised him. She rarely asked. She commanded. An hour later, Ji-Hoon entered the estate, where she sat alone beside the garden pond. The elegant woman who once controlled every room she entered now looked smaller somehow, older. She gestured toward the empty chair across from her. Sit. He remained standing. You said it was urgent. She looked at the koi fish swimming beneath the water. Do you still think about her? Ji-Hoon's expression hardened. Why are we discussing this? Answer me. Silence stretched between them. Finally he spoke. Every day. Hyrim closed her eyes. Regret flickered across her face before disappearing again. Some mistakes cannot be repaired. Ji-Hoon frowned. What does that mean? Before she could answer, violent coughing interrupted her. The family doctor hurried forward, helping her stand. Madam needs to rest. As they walked away, she looked back at Ji-Hoon with an expression he had never seen before. Guilt. Real guilt. It unsettled him more than he cared to admit. That evening, alone inside his office, Ji-Hoon poured himself a glass of whiskey, but never drank it. His gaze drifted toward the locked bottom drawer of his desk. 7 years. He had never opened it. The key remained on his keychain every single day. Countless times he had considered reading Nia's letter. Countless times he had stopped himself, because reading it meant accepting the possibility that he had been wrong. And if he had been wrong, then he had destroyed the only person who ever loved him without wanting anything in return. His phone buzzed again. It was the foundation director in Vancouver. Chairman Kang, one of our therapists, has agreed to speak during the gala. She has an extraordinary story of resilience after rebuilding her life as a single mother. Ji-Hoon froze. Single mother. Something deep inside him tightened for reasons he couldn't explain. He stared once more at the locked drawer. His hand slowly reached toward it, then stopped. Across the ocean, Nia tucked Eli into bed. He held his favorite storybook against his chest. "Mom? Yes? If my dad ever comes," she smiled gently. "What would you say?" Eli thought for a long moment before answering. "I'd ask him if he likes pancakes." Nia laughed through unexpected tears. "Why pancakes?" "Because if he likes pancakes," Eli whispered sleepily, "then maybe we'd be friends." Nia kissed his forehead after he fell asleep. She turned off the bedroom light and quietly walked onto the small balcony overlooking the city. Above her, the same moon that shone over Vancouver also hung above Seoul. She wondered if Ji-Hoon had found happiness. She hoped he had. She no longer wished him pain. She only wished he had chosen trust over pride 7 years earlier. Back in Seoul, Ji-Hoon unlocked the bottom drawer halfway, then closed it again without looking inside. He didn't notice that an old cream-colored envelope had shifted beneath the movement, exposing 4 faded words written in elegant handwriting. "For my husband." Nor did he know that in less than a month, fate would place him face to face with a 7-year-old boy who had his eyes, his quiet determination, and his habit of tilting his head exactly the same way whenever he smiled. 3 weeks later, a private jet carrying Kang Ji-Hoon descended through the clouds toward Vancouver International Airport. He stood beside the cabin window with both hands in his pockets, watching the city appear beneath him. Normally he would have spent the flight reviewing financial reports or preparing for meetings. This time he hadn't read a single page. His thoughts kept returning to one sentence from the invitation. A single mother. It shouldn't have meant anything. Thousands of women raise children alone. Yet something about those words had lodged inside his chest, refusing to leave. Min-suk looked up from his tablet. "Chairman, the Foundation has arranged a tour of the rehabilitation center before tonight's gala." Ji-Hoon nodded absent-mindedly. "Fine. After that, you'll meet donors and local officials." "Fine." Min-suk studied him quietly. He had worked beside Ji-Hoon for over 15 years. He recognized the look on his chairman's face. It only appeared whenever the past found a way back into the present. "Chairman," Ji-Hoon looked at him. "Do you want me to cancel the tour?" Ji-Hoon looked out the window again. "No," he answered almost to himself. "Let's see it." Less than an hour later, a convoy of black SUVs stopped outside the Harmony Pediatric Rehabilitation Center. Staff members lined the entrance to welcome the billionaire whose donations had financed 2 new therapy wings. Cameras flashed as Ji-Hoon stepped from the vehicle. His tailored navy suit contrasted sharply with the colorful murals painted across the building behind him. The black dragon tattoo curled visibly above his collar as photographers rushed forward. Children peered curiously through the windows. "Is that the rich man?" one little girl whispered. "He looks scary," another replied. Ji-Hoon heard them and almost smiled. Almost. The center director, Michael Harris, greeted him warmly. "Chairman Kang, welcome. Your generosity has changed countless lives." Ji-Hoon bowed politely. "I'm glad the children benefited. They certainly have." As they entered the building, laughter echoed down the hallways. Bright drawings covered the walls. Music drifted from one therapy room, while another echoed with excited cheers after a child managed to take 3 unassisted steps. Ji-Hoon slowed his pace. The atmosphere felt strangely familiar. Hope lived here, quietly, patiently, just as it had wherever Nia worked. They stopped outside a large therapy gym where children practiced balance exercises. Through the glass, Ji-Hoon noticed a young therapist kneeling beside a little boy. "Again," she encouraged gently. "One more step." The child laughed as he reached the finish line. Everyone applauded. Ji-Hoon felt something tighten inside him. He remembered standing outside Nia's therapy room, years ago, secretly watching her celebrate tiny victories exactly like this. Before he could dwell on the memory, another voice rang through the hallway. "Catch me if you can." A boy burst around the corner at full speed, clutching a paper airplane. He wasn't watching where he was going. Neither was Ji-Hoon. They collided. The paper airplane floated harmlessly to the floor, while the boy stumbled backward. Ji-Hoon instinctively reached out and caught him before he hit the ground. "Easy," Ji-Hoon said. The little boy looked up. Large, dark eyes met Ji-Hoon's. Time stopped. Ji-Hoon's breathing became uneven. There was something impossibly familiar about those eyes. The boy smiled sheepishly. "Sorry, mister." Ji-Hoon found himself smiling back without thinking. You run very fast. Mom says I run too fast. Your mother is probably right. The boy laughed. It was bright, genuine, the kind of laugh Ji-Hoon hadn't heard in his own home for years. What's your name? Ji-Hoon asked. Eli. How old are you? So 7. The number echoed strangely inside Ji-Hoon's mind. Before he could ask another question, a woman's voice called from the end of the corridor. Eli. The boy turned immediately. Mom. Ji-Hoon slowly looked toward the voice. A woman hurried around the corner carrying several therapy folders. She stopped the instant she saw who stood beside her son. The folders slipped from her hands. Papers scattered across the polished floor. Nia. Neither of them moved. Neither of them breathed. 7 years disappeared in a single heartbeat. Ji-Hoon stared at her, as though the world around him had dissolved. She looked different, stronger somehow. Her hair was slightly shorter. There were faint lines at the corners of her eyes that hadn't existed before. But she was still the woman he had never truly stopped loving. Nia couldn't speak. Of every place in the world, of every possible day, she had never imagined this one. Eli looked from his mother to Ji-Hoon. Mom? He asked innocently. Do you know him? Her lips parted, but no words came out. Ji-Hoon finally managed to whisper, Nia. Hearing her name in his voice after 7 years almost broke her. She forced herself to remain calm. The children were watching. Her colleagues were watching. Most importantly, Eli was watching. She bent down and gathered the scattered papers with trembling hands. Ji-Hoon instinctively knelt to help. Their fingers brushed as they reached for the same folder. Both froze. Memories rushed back with painful clarity. Late-night dinners, shared dreams, wedding vows, a divorce signature, an unopened letter. Nia pulled her hand away first. Thank you, she said quietly. It was the first time she had spoken to him in 7 years. Ji-Hoon searched her face desperately. You're here, she nodded once. Yes. He wanted to ask 1,000 questions. Why didn't you tell me where you were? Are you happy? Did you ever forgive me? Did you read my messages after I tried contacting you years later? But the only thing he managed to say was, I've looked for you. Nia's eyes flickered with surprise. No, she answered softly. You looked after it was too late. The words struck harder than any insult ever could. Eli looked up at his mother. Mom? She forced a smile for her son. Sweetheart, why don't you go help Grandma Agnes with the art room? Okay. The little boy looked back at Ji-Hoon before leaving. Bye, mister. Ji-Hoon watched him run away. Again that strange feeling returned. The boy's walk, the way he smiled, even the slight tilt of his head. It all felt painfully familiar. He's a good kid, Ji-Hoon said quietly. Nia looked toward Eli with unmistakable love. He's my whole world. Ji-Hoon smiled faintly. His father must be proud. Nia slowly turned back toward him. There was sadness in her eyes. There was disappointment. And beneath both, a truth she still couldn't bring herself to reveal. He would be, she whispered. If he knew, before Ji-Hoon could ask what she meant, Michael Harris approached with several board members. Chairman Kang. Everyone is waiting for the tour. The moment shattered. Ji-Hoon looked at Nia one last time. Can we talk? She hesitated. Every instinct told her to walk away. Every scar reminded her what happened the last time she trusted him with her heart. After the gala, she answered quietly. If there's still something left to say. She walked away before he could respond. Ji-Hoon remained standing in the hallway, unable to take his eyes off the little boy disappearing around the corner. Min-seok stepped beside him. Chairman? Ji-Hoon didn't look away. Min-seok? Yes? Find out everything you can about that child. Min-seok frowned. Why? Ji-Hoon's voice was almost a whisper. Because when I looked into his eyes, he paused. It felt like I was looking into a mirror from 7 years ago. Unseen by either man, Sister Agnes stood at the end of the corridor, her hands tightly clasped around a worn wooden rosary. She had recognized Ji-Hoon the instant he arrived. She had also recognized the dragon tattoo curling up his neck from the photographs Nia had once hidden away. Quiet tears filled the elderly nun's eyes as she whispered to herself, Lord, the Father has finally met his son. But before the truth could be spoken, someone else had already recognized Ji-Hoon as well. Across the parking lot, inside a black sedan, Seo Ra-eun slowly lowered a pair of binoculars. Her smile disappeared the moment she saw Nia and Eli together. So, she whispered coldly, you didn't disappear after all. She reached for her phone and dialed a familiar number. "Madam Yoon," she said quietly. "We have a problem. Nia is alive, and she's not alone." Ji-Hoon did not hear another word for the rest of the tour. Executives spoke. Donors applauded. Cameras flashed. Children smiled for photographs. None of it reached him. His eyes kept searching every hallway, every therapy room, every window, hoping to catch another glimpse of the little boy with familiar eyes. Every time he failed, the strange ache inside his chest grew stronger. Beside him, Min-seok quietly noticed something he had never seen before. Chairman Kang had completely lost his composure. Hours later, the charity gala began inside the Grand Pacific Ballroom. Crystal chandeliers illuminated hundreds of guests dressed in elegant evening wear. Business leaders, politicians, philanthropists, and journalists filled the room. A large screen displayed photographs of children whose lives had been transformed through rehabilitation. Ji-Hoon sat at the head table, but his attention drifted toward the entrance every few seconds. Then the ballroom doors opened. Nia walked in wearing a simple midnight blue gown. She wore no extravagant jewelry, no diamonds, no designer accessories. She didn't need them. Grace surrounded her naturally. Conversations gradually quieted. Many guests turned to admire her without knowing who she was. Ji-Hoon stood unconsciously. Their eyes met across the ballroom. 7 years disappeared once again. Before either of them could move, applause erupted as the master of ceremonies stepped onto the stage. "Ladies and gentlemen, tonight we'd like to recognize someone whose courage has inspired every child in our rehabilitation program." The giant screen behind him illuminated with photographs. Nia laughing with children. Nia helping patients walk again. Nia comforting frightened parents. 7 years ago, the host continued, our next speaker arrived in Canada with almost nothing except a suitcase, extraordinary compassion, and the determination to begin again. Today, she serves as our senior pediatric rehabilitation specialist. Ji-Hoon slowly looked back toward Nia. Begin again. Those words pierced him. The audience applauded warmly as Nia walked toward the podium. She took a slow breath before speaking. 7 years ago, I believed losing everything meant my life had ended. Ji-Hoon lowered his eyes. I was wrong. Nia smiled gently. Sometimes life breaks your heart, not to destroy you, but to make room for something even more precious. The screen changed. Photographs of smiling children appeared one after another. Then one image froze Ji-Hoon where he sat. Nia stood beside Eli, both covered in finger paint, laughing so hard neither noticed the camera. The ballroom smiled. Ji-Hoon couldn't. He stared at the photograph, the boy again. Why did he feel connected? Nia continued. Every child here reminded me that healing isn't forgetting the past. She paused. Healing is choosing not to let the past steal tomorrow. Ji-Hoon couldn't take his eyes off her. There was no bitterness in her voice. No anger, only quiet strength. Somehow, that hurt even more. After another standing ovation, guests surrounded Nia with congratulations. Ji-Hoon waited patiently until the crowd finally thinned. At last, they stood facing one another beneath a balcony overlooking Vancouver Harbor. Neither spoke immediately. The silence between them carried 7 years of unanswered questions. Finally, Ji-Hoon broke it. You look well. Nia smiled faintly. Life became peaceful. I'm glad. She studied him carefully. He looked older, lonelier. The confidence remained, but the warmth behind his eyes seemed buried beneath years of regret. Are you? She asked quietly. He understood the real question. Are you happy? He looked toward the dark ocean. No. The answer surprised even him. Nia lowered her gaze. I was sorry to hear about Chairman Kang. Ji-Hoon nodded slowly. His grandfather had passed away 3 years earlier. He kept asking about you until the end. Nia swallowed. He was kinder to me than most people realized. Ji-Hoon looked at her. He regretted what happened. Did you? The question landed softly. Yet it carried 7 years of pain. Ji-Hoon answered without hesitation. Every single day. Nia searched his face. She wanted to believe him. Part of her always would. But another part remembered standing in his office, begging him to read one letter. Regret, she whispered, always arrives after the damage is done. He closed his eyes briefly. You're right. Another silence settled. Then Ji-Hoon asked the question that had haunted him since morning. The boy? Nia's heartbeat quickened. Eli? Yes. What about him? Ji-Hoon hesitated. His father. Before he finished, Eli's excited voice echoed across the balcony. Mom! The little boy ran toward them carrying 2 paper cups of hot chocolate. He stopped beside Nia and looked curiously at Ji-Hoon. Hi again, mister. Ji-Hoon smiled warmly. Hello. Eli held out one of the cups. I got extra. Ji-Hoon blinked. For me? Grandma Agnes says hot chocolate makes people less grumpy. Nia couldn't help laughing. Ji-Hoon actually laughed too. It had been years since laughter escaped him so naturally. He accepted the cup. Thank you. Eli nodded proudly. You're welcome. He studied Ji-Hoon for several seconds. Mom. Yes? His eyes looked like mine. Everything stopped. Nia froze. Ji-Hoon slowly looked down at the little boy. Eli tilted his head exactly the way Ji-Hoon always did while thinking. Even Min-Sok had pointed it out countless times over the years. Ji-Hoon forced a smile. Maybe that's just a coincidence. Eli shrugged innocently. Maybe. He turned toward the dessert table. Can I get cake? Nia nodded automatically. Only 1 piece. 2? 1. Okay. He ran away laughing. Ji-Hoon watched him disappear. Children notice everything, he murmured. Nia whispered yes. Before either could continue, Min-Sok hurried toward Ji-Hoon carrying his phone. Chairman, I'm sorry to interrupt. What is it? Madam Yoon collapsed in Seoul. Ji-Hoon's expression changed instantly. How serious? The doctors say she keeps asking to speak with you immediately. Ji-Hoon looked back at Nia. There was desperation in his eyes now. I have to leave tonight. She nodded. Go. Will you still be here when I come back? Nia didn't answer immediately. I don't know. He took 1 cautious step closer. Nia, please. She looked into his eyes. 7 years ago, I begged you for 5 minutes. His shoulders fell. I know. Now you're asking me to wait. He couldn't deny it. Because it was true. She turned away before the tears gathering in her eyes could fall. Take care of your family, Ji-Hoon. You were my family. She stopped walking but didn't turn around. Then you should have believed me. She disappeared into the crowd. Ji-Hoon stood motionless, long after she was gone. 6 hours later, his private jet landed in Seoul. He drove straight to the hospital where Madam Yoon lay connected to monitors. Her once commanding voice now barely a whisper. She motioned everyone else to leave the room. When they were finally alone, she looked at him with eyes filled not with authority, but fear. Ji-Hoon, she whispered. He sat beside her bed. I'm here. Her frail hand reached beneath her pillow and pulled out a small digital recorder. Tears rolled slowly down her face. Before I die. She struggled to breathe. There's something you must hear. Ji-Hoon frowned as she placed the recorder into his hand. What is this? She closed her eyes. The truth. About the day you signed the divorce papers. His heart stopped. Outside the hospital room, hidden behind the partially open door, Seo Ra-yoon silently listened. Panic spread across her face for the first time in 7 years. Because if Ji-Hoon heard that recording, every lie she had built her future upon would collapse before sunrise. Ji-Hoon stared at the small digital recorder resting in his trembling hand. The hospital room felt suffocatingly quiet as the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor echoed between them. Madam Yoon struggled to lift her frail hand and whispered, "Play it." He hesitated for only a second before pressing the button. Static crackled through the tiny speaker before a familiar voice emerged. The photographs are convincing. He'll never question them. Ji-Hoon's heartbeat stopped. It was Seo Ra-in. Another voice followed, Madam Yoon's own. He trusts evidence more than emotion. Ra-un chuckled softly. Good. Once he signs the divorce papers, she'll leave on her own. What about the letter? Madam Yoon asked. Don't worry, Ra-un replied confidently. He'll never read it. His pride won't allow it. Ji-Hoon's hands began shaking violently. The recording continued. If she tells him she's pregnant, she won't have time. The lawyers will interrupt before she can explain. Once she's gone, he'll bury himself in work, and eventually, he'll have no one left except me. The recording ended. Silence swallowed the room. Ji-Hoon slowly lowered the recorder and looked at Madam Yoon with eyes filled with disbelief and unbearable pain. You knew. Tears streamed down her cheeks. I believed I was protecting this family. Ji-Hoon's voice cracked. You destroyed this family. She closed her eyes. I know. He stepped closer, barely able to breathe. You destroyed my marriage. She nodded weakly. I know. His next words came out as little more than a whisper. You destroyed my child's chance to know his father. Madame Yoon's eyes flew open. Child? Ji-Hoon looked away as tears rolled freely down his face. Nia was pregnant. The old woman's entire body trembled. No, she whispered. I didn't know. Ji-Hoon's expression remained heartbreakingly calm. You never cared enough to find out. Without another word, he walked out of the room. Outside, Min-Sok stood waiting. One look at Ji-Hoon's face told him everything. Chairman, Ji-Hoon slowly handed him the recorder. Prepare the jet. Where are we going? Ji-Hoon looked toward the sunrise beyond the hospital windows. To bring my family home. 2 days later, Canadian authorities arrested Seo Ra-eun as she attempted to leave Vancouver. Faced with the original surveillance files, altered photographs, financial records, witness testimony, and the recorded confession, she could no longer deny what she had done. As officers placed handcuffs around her wrists, she glared at Ji-Hoon. You ruined my life. Ji-Hoon looked at her quietly. No, you ruined your own. The day you decided someone else's happiness was something you could steal. She lowered her head as the officers led her away. Hours later, Ji-Hoon stood outside Harmony Pediatric Rehabilitation Center, holding the cream-colored envelope he had finally read from beginning to end during the flight. Every page was stained with old tears. Every sentence reminded him of the wife he had failed. Sister Agnes greeted him with a gentle smile. I've prayed for this day for 7 years. Ji-Hoon bowed respectfully. Thank you for protecting them when I didn't. She placed a comforting hand on his arm. Go. She's waiting. Ji-Hoon slowly walked toward the music room. Through the open doorway he saw Nia sitting at the piano while children gathered around her singing happily. Her smile was peaceful. It was the smile he had stolen 7 years earlier. When the children finished, they thanked her and ran outside. Nia looked up and saw him standing there. Neither moved. Neither spoke. Ji-Hoon finally stepped into the room. I read every word. Nia remained silent. He held up the letter with trembling hands. You told me everything. You begged me to trust you. You told me about our baby. You asked me to choose us before it was too late. Tears filled his eyes. I never gave you that chance. Nia looked down quietly. No. Ji-Hoon slowly lowered himself onto one knee. Not because he expected forgiveness. Because regret had become too heavy to carry standing. I'm sorry. The words were simple, but they carried 7 years of guilt. There isn't a single day left in my life that will ever be enough to repay what I took from you. Tears rolled down Nia's cheeks. I forgave you a long time ago. Ji-Hoon looked up in disbelief. You did. She nodded gently. Forgiveness gave me peace, but forgiveness never erased what happened. He accepted her answer without argument. I know. Nia turned toward the doorway. Eli. The little boy walked into the room, carrying his toy airplane. He smiled at his mother, before noticing Ji-Hoon. Hi, mister. Nia knelt beside him. Sweetheart, do you remember asking me where your father was? Eli nodded. She smiled through tears. He's standing right in front of you. The little boy slowly looked at Ji-Hoon. Neither spoke for several seconds. Finally, Eli walked closer. You're my dad? Ji-Hoon could barely answer. Yes. Eli tilted his head thoughtfully. Then do you like pancakes? Ji-Hoon laughed through tears. I love pancakes. Eli smiled brightly. Good. Because Mom makes the best pancakes in the whole world. Ji-Hoon nodded while tears streamed down his face. I'm sure she does. Eli stepped forward and wrapped his small arms around Ji-Hoon's waist. The billionaire who had negotiated billion-dollar deals without flinching completely broke down as he hugged his son for the first time. 7 years of missed birthdays, missed bedtime stories, missed hugs, and missed first words could never be returned. But he silently promised himself he would never miss another moment. The months that followed were not easy. Ji-Hoon never asked Nia to pretend the past had never happened. He never pressured her to come back. Instead, he earned back their trust one day at a time. He attended every school performance, every doctor appointment, every birthday, every pancake breakfast on Saturday mornings. He learned how Eli liked his sandwiches cut, what books he loved before bed, and how he always smiled exactly like his mother, whenever he felt safe. Nia watched quietly as the man she once loved slowly became the father their son deserved. One snowy evening after Eli's Christmas concert, the three of them walked home together beneath softly falling snow. Eli held Nia's hand with one hand and Ji-Hoon's with the other, until suddenly he let go and ran ahead to catch snowflakes. Their hands brushed together. Neither moved away. Ji-Hoon looked at her. "I can't erase what I did." "No," Nia answered softly. "You can't. But I'll spend the rest of my life making sure I never become that man again." She searched his eyes for a long moment before quietly intertwining her fingers with his. "Then let's stop living for yesterday." He smiled through tears. "And start living for tomorrow?" She nodded. "For tomorrow." Snow continued falling around them as Eli laughed in the distance, calling for both of them to hurry. Together they walked toward him, not because the past had disappeared, but because love, honesty, and humility had finally become stronger than pride. Back in Seoul, the cream-colored letter was placed inside a simple glass frame in their new family home. Beneath it rested a small silver plaque engraved with a single sentence. "Always read the words of the person who loves you, before believing the voices of those who do not." The end. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes that true love deserves honesty before judgment, and forgiveness before pride.